most of my career has been doing things that no one else has ever done before, and I didn't ever feel like I was alone in this journey. Like there's lots of other people doing MLOps, but oftentimes there was no one around me doing it, and so um, but it's really kind of put me in a good spot in my career, and I think it'll help a lot of other people uh, the same. Like just follow your passion.
Hey nerds, Monica here. Welcome to the Data Podcast for Nerds, where we get to talk to amazing professionals and ask them all about how they're using data to solve the world's problems. We're highlighting skills that data professionals use on a daily basis. Plus, we always include some fun bits because we're all nerds here and we love to have fun. So thank you for tuning in, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And as always, folks, happy learning. Today with us, we have Matt Sharp. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
So, we start off our episodes by understanding people's origin stories. So, if you could please tell us about how you got into your data career.
Um, yeah, it's something I kind of fell into. I mean, when I was in college, data science didn't really exist. It's something that was coined essentially right when I was graduating. And so, but I got my degree in chemical engineering. I ended up going to work for Intel and Micron. So the first 2 years of my career, I was wearing a bunny suit and going into a clean room and got to enjoy that experience of feeling like you're walking into the future just because there's $1 million machines and there's robots running everywhere, and it felt like Star Wars essentially. So that was fun, but so like as a chemical engineer, my job wasn't necessarily easy. I was running all of these experiments, fluctuating pressures, temperatures, plasmas, all those kind of different things that's required to create microchips, memory, in my case. And so running these experiments, there was just lots and lots of data collected. And so I started trying to automate what I was doing. And it turns out that you kind of need a really good grasp of data science to automate that much data and like the complexity of the experiments I was running. And so pretty soon I was a data scientist, just kind of doing my job and kind of trying to automate it. And then eventually along the lines is the kind of MLOps revolution started happening. MLflow came out and other things like that. And I just remember having the same feeling as a data scientist that like I wish I had the right tools to work on what I was doing. So pretty soon I was building those tools, just for me. And then I went on to build it for other people. And so so a lot of my career has been not necessarily enjoying what I was doing because I didn't have the right tools, and so going to go build those tools to help automate my job. So I've kind of gone from chemical engineering to data science to MLOps, and that's kind of been my career.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you've always kind of been ahead of the game, trying things out. And so you're just one of those like trendsetters.
I don't know if I necessarily consider myself a trendsetter, but I definitely got into MLOps and data science when they were young.
Mhm.
Um, and so I've definitely seen, in my 11-year career, like I've seen it all, and it's just interesting, and I feel like I've seen it from the ground floor as an individual contributor, which is a very different experience than a lot of other people I talk to who try to transition into data science and um, or they try to take their engineering or their stats background or whatever it is and kind of come into it from maybe from a higher level, and so it's interesting.
Yeah. You might not be a trendsetter, but you do consider yourself to be a data pioneer. Why is that a coin for you?
Yeah, so I find myself that um yeah, so here in Utah we have a holiday called Pioneer Day. Um
Ooh.
and it's not really celebrated anywhere else. It's kind of like when Utah became a state. And it was founded by uh what you might the Mormon pioneers. They came over, and I actually have on both sides of the family. I have lots of pioneer heritage people coming in here, and I was just reflecting about like their lives and like how difficult it was, but like how like they were pioneering their move and to you know like the Salt Lake Valley when they got here was just like a desert, right? Like no, it was not enviable land. No one wanted to be here, which is why they settled here, right? It's because they were trying to escape persecution, and so like I just felt like a lot of people in the data space, at least right now, are very similar. Like we're exploring new territory. For the longest time, no one wanted to do any of this data stuff. Now it's kind of exploded, and lots of people want to do it, but that's only because the groundwork has been set of, you know, making things easier to work with, you know, uh, building trenches and other things to make this desert fertile, right? And so that's kind of where the why I came up with the term and coined it.
I love that. That makes so much sense, especially for, your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Also, it sounds like you worked with a lot of very interesting data sets throughout your career. So, my question is like what's your favorite type of data set or type of data problem that you like to solve?
I mean that's a good question. To be honest, I really like problems that have real world impact. So whatever that may be. So I'm not necessarily tied down to any type of data sets, but yeah, I've as a chemical engineer, I had lots of impact as far as you know making higher yields. Really making an impact on how those wafers turned out. Um, and current businesses of e-commerce, like you can make real impact of making the user experience better, of helping. Um, so so currently I work for a company, LTK, and before I worked for Shopify. They're kind of very similar in the fact that like we support a lot of entrepreneurs or creators, and so being able to make an impact and help other people make money, like that that is something I definitely enjoy doing, and so that's what I would say.
Yeah. What first attracted you to the MLOps space? So you said that with your data science experience, you had to kind of gravitate towards that because the data that you were working on was very complex. But then what was kind of that progression into the MLOps space?
So like when I was a data scientist, um like there was no other engineers around to really help me, and so mostly like I know this like I still know lots of companies and people in this today where like the whole data science platform runs on their laptop. Like that's what it is, and it works because I was there. Like I was that guy who built a bunch of models that helped my job, and my boss would come and be like, hey, can you run that thing? And it was ad hoc requests. I would just spin it up and run the model on last week of data or whatever it was. And so like I essentially was that API, right? And it got to a point where like some of the tools I was building, everyone else wanted to use them, and they didn't want me to be the bottleneck. And so I just remember going, like, making friends with the people in IT who literally, they were like a mile, like, labs are really big. They were literally like a mile away. And so, like, I would have to walk a mile to get over to the IT department, and I would like make friends with them, and I eventually convinced them to like spin up um, a VM for me. Um, and so they did that. They spun up a Red Hat VM and like just kind of gave it to me. And so from there, I had to learn like how do I even shell into it? Like how do I use this? I had to figure out how to like install Apache so that way I could turn it into a server. And like I was really building this from the ground up. And then once I got my model, I had to figure out, okay, how do I like build, like how do I get other people to use this? Like how do I build an API? And so um, doing all of that without like much help was like it was a difficult and painful process, but it was like I don't want other data scientists to have to ever worry about this, right? Like I want whatever team I'm working on, the data scientists can just focus on, how do I improve the model? How do I build it? How do I, and then like when it comes time to deploy, like I'll have tools that'll make that easy. But yeah, so I did all that work. I got up this API, and then other people were able to start using it. And it was just a really good feeling to be able to set
Yeah,
up this tool. Yeah,
absolutely.
for that tool I actually had to build the front end too. So it was yeah, so it was all in. Like I had to learn everything.
Yeah, how was working with the front end? Have you ever had experience with that at all?
Um no, but I kind of figured it out. I kind of figured um so probably the smartest thing I did was so this was back in like 2014, 2015, and there were lots of wars in JavaScript land about, you know, like Vue had just come out, I think, and like everyone, you know, wanted to use React or Angular, and like it just felt like there were so many front end frameworks going up, and like everyone was saying use this and this, and I just like I don't want to learn a framework like that's not my not my expertise. So I just learned vanilla JavaScript, and it worked super good. It was very fast. Like there was no need to learn a framework, and so yeah, so like I was able to get enough by. So it was good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to deep dive into this MLOps journey, and so we're gonna go into the fun bits.
Absolutely.
Hey nerd, are you looking for a career in data? I would absolutely love to help you out. I just launched a data career strategy program that helps folks break into data without breaking anything. I provided a link in the show notes if you want to learn more information about it. Now, back to the fun bits. All right. So I know that you have read tons of MLOps books, and some of them, you're like itching for more, right? And that led you to write your own book.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your book.
So my book is called LLMs in Production. Um, I I think it's really good. I'm obviously biased, but what we do is we help you take the technology first, kind of learn what LLMs are, but then like how to take that technology and turn it into a product. And that's kind of what I think about in production is this is a product that people will actually use, and you can, you know, make money off of it, or if that's not your goal, then at least you can get users to start interacting with it and start using it. And because going, like we already talked about, like the last thing I want is for something to be stuck on your laptop. um, One, either no one's going to use it, or two, you're the only one who's going to use it. And so so that's kind of always been things I really like is how do we get this thing to value? How do we get it to start making an impact? And so, and currently, I would say LLMs are right now like one of the hardest things to deploy as far as AI goes, machine learning and data, just because uh, one, like they're just really, really big models. And so that adds a bunch of complexity. Two, like working with text data in general is very difficult compared to other data for a lot of different reasons. One of them simply being like words don't really mean anything other than what we, like we give them meaning, but like for example, a picture might not have much meaning, but like we can still get values and data out of it by like measuring, how much red, green, and blue there are at different pixels. And so like um, we can really transform pictures into data and not so much with words, right? And so it's a little bit trickier problem. And so anyways, so there's lots of different things like that make LLMs difficult. And so I figured if I wrote an MLOps book that showed you how to do it on the hardest thing possible, hopefully people could then take it and figure out all this MLOps things for easier use cases. And so that's kind of one of the main goals of the book is to show you, from beginning to end, this is how you create a product, and this is how you turn an AI technology into something useful. So,
Mm-hmm. So in that book, do you kind of break down how the LLMs are working with that complicated text data?
we do maybe not as deeply as some people would want.
Okay.
Uh, that's just because we needed a lot of room for the in production part, and so I think people will enjoy it, and people who don't know anything about how LLMs work, they'll learn a lot and they'll get enough so that way they can know. So, like, one of the main goals we had when introducing LLMs is like we wanted people to know, like, project A or project B, which one is going to be easier? Like, which one can an LLM do? Because if you're not sure what they are or how they work, like, um, you know, it'll be difficult, right? And so like
Mm-hmm.
like building a chatbot is almost like it's super easy with an LLM. Like that's what they're really good at. However, like playing chess, not so much. That's going to be very, very difficult to build. And so like, but understanding why those things are, we
Mm-hmm.
definitely dig into that and help you understand kind of like why, because it might not necessarily make sense. So
Yeah, that makes I mean that makes a lot of sense for you to at least touch on the, capabilities of what LLMs can do, right? I've been seeing this post float around everywhere about how ChatGPT can't tell you how many R's are in strawberry,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So that's yeah. I mean, that's probably not a problem with the LLM itself, but a problem with the encoder, which kind of gets back to my original thing of like when you take words and you try to convert them into tokens, like we don't really have a solid way of doing that. Like we have some, well, okay, we have solid ways of doing that, but we don't like have a perfect way to do that. Does that make
Got
sense?
it.
And so
Yes. Okay.
so yeah, so like we're making educated guesses of like what tokens are important and things like that. And that's why like and we get into it in the book, but like some really small LLMs are like really good at math. Um and but like OpenAI's GPT-4, like it's a huge model, like it's terrible at math, right? Like, and a lot of that comes down to of how that model breaks up the different words and numbers and how it can interpret them and come up with it. And so, um, anyways, so so we definitely get into that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another really cool thing about your book is that you have hands-on example projects, right?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, so we didn't want to. So there is a lot of theory you kind of need to lay the groundwork on, especially because when we were working on this, there really wasn't any other content out there. There especially wasn't any other books out there. We were definitely trying to aim to try to be one of the first books out there that kind of taught this stuff. Um, and so we do have to kind of build a bunch of groundwork, but we wanted people to leave the book feeling like they had hands-on experience, they knew what they were doing. If they had to do this in a project, they could. So yeah, we have 3 hands-on projects. Well, one of my favorites, we got really good reviews from people. People seem to love it. Is like we show you how to build like a coding copilot. So you can we build like a VS Code extension. We kind of go through the whole thing and show you this is how you can build a copilot that'll help you learn to code. And I think this will be really valuable for a lot of different people. One who don't who just want something running locally on their laptop, or they don't want their code being shipped up to, you know, whatever API, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or whatever, and so um, I don't know. I think it's a pretty fun project and it works pretty well by the end. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Your book is available now?
it is still in early access. So it's completely written. So right now we are using a publisher. We're using Manning Publishing Company, and so they've been amazing to work with. Right now they're kind of going through all the copy edits. Um, I didn't realize how many times I used the word just, but it's really nice for them to kind of go in and clean things up and clean up the grammar. So we're in that process. So and in probably about 2 months, I believe it'll be out for people to uh, get a printed copy. So we're getting really close. Yeah,
That's good. I'm excited for you.
thank you.
You posted the other day about LLMs answering interview questions and how they don't do such a good job. And I had a question for you. Have you seen these like tools that people are using during interviews?
Yeah, that was surprising or not. Like that was one of the first use cases a lot of people were playing around with when it came to
Oh,
LLMs. And I mean, most of them were toy projects, but it's just funny how like one of the first reactions humans do is when they get a new tool is like, how can I use this tool to cheat? Like, like that says a little bit about the human nature. But yeah, and so like yeah, one of the first examples, like maybe just 1 or 2 months after Chat GPT came out, almost almost 2 years ago now. That's crazy to think. Like people were, getting like old Google lenses or things like that, and they were setting up um, like a model to run, and they would send questions that it would get, and then it would display on their glasses so that way they could read answers. And so yeah, and it's interesting to see because just kind of like how things will go. I just saw a post today about someone talking about there was a TikTok video. Someone was recording another student in front of them, how they were using a cheating tool or I don't know if it was necessarily a cheating tool, but it would take a screenshot of like their test question, and then it would like recommend what answer to do. And he just, screenshot took the answer and put it in, and he got 100%. And like this was like a med student. And so it was just like it was a quiz, so I don't know how, but it's just like Gen AI is definitely changing the game, and like a lot of education isn't really set up for how to deal with it. But like
hmm.
to a certain extent, like that kind of leads to different questions of like, are these like med students of the future, right? Like, are they, going to be enhanced by AI to improve things? But, or are they just going to be replaced by AI? Because my, what I was thinking when that was happening is just like my wife recently went to the doctor and she asked the doctor a question and the doctor just sat down and Googled it. And she's like, I could have Googled myself. Like, why? Like, why do I have to, like, why do I want to go to a doctor if they're not going to like know or have an opinion, or like you want their experience from them. And so like when students are doing those things, and like we're going to get a lot of, in the next several years, we're going to have a lot of graduated med students who are using AI to kind of cheat through things, right? And like it's going
Mhm.
to really lower the bar, and people won't be trusting their doctors as much because of it, right? And so then because people trust their doctors less, they're going to trust AI more, which probably makes sense because it was AI that they were really getting through the med student, right? And so
That's
it
just wild because in some instances you know that the AI is also not giving you an accurate response. So then it's like who or what do you even trust anymore?
right. And so this is really where it comes down to of like, yeah, we need a better education system, but also like if you're doing anything and AI is able to get 100% score on your test, like you really got to worry that you're not going to have a job when you graduate. And not that that's really going to happen. Like things move a lot slower than probably um, like anyone in school right now. Like things will move way slower than you know they have to worry about. But like in the future, right? Like 30 years is a really long time, right? Like I've only been in the industry for like 11 years, and when I started, AlexNet was here, and we were just able to tell the difference between a cat and a dog. And now we're able to generate images of cats and dogs doing whatever we want, right? Like from being space heroes, or like what we can. And so like the way things are moving, like things are moving really quickly. And so
Mhm.
yeah, so don't focus on passing tests, focus on learning knowledge. It's you know
That's that's fantastic advice.
so
Yeah. So, talking about learning, what's your approach when you're trying to learn new things? Do you still leverage heavily on these technologies, or are you old school and go to books, or how would you recommend other folks kind of approach learning new things?
um I think it really depends, right? So like when we were writing our book, we're both, me and my co-author are both LLM experts, right? And so like we had no shame in using LLMs for our book, but we were using it probably very differently from someone else who was writing a book. So like one of the things we were doing is, when we came up to a topic, we would ask an LLM lots of questions, and we would get to a point till it would start giving us wrong answers. And once we knew, okay, the LLM doesn't know this means it's knowledge on the edge, and it's going to be valuable for our readers to hear this type of information because it's not something they can just get anywhere else on the internet or asking an LLM or anything like that. And so like that's um and so there's definitely aspects there, right? So like
Yeah.
yeah, so I use these tools all the time, but like you got to know, like they mostly know general knowledge, and general knowledge is definitely different depending on what industry you are and what it's been trained on, right? And so like you might think it's specialized knowledge, but if it's general knowledge to that specialty, it's still fair game for an LLM, right? And so um so yeah, so like there's definitely an aspect of, kind of learning different research tools, really going. So I feel like one of the things that a lot of people fail fill out right now is like they always want quick answers. They ask a question and they want an answer right away. And to a certain extent, if that's all you're really good at, you're never going to get amazing at anything, right? Like you need to get to the point where you can't get easy answers. You have to kind of dig and you have to kind of get different people's perspectives. You get different tools, perspectives nowadays, and kind of really think about these from multiple angles. And that's really going to be a key differentiator for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really cool approach. Like that's sort of what I do when I'm programming is that I'll get to a point and just break it on purpose so that I can read like the error that I'm getting and kind of figure out what it's actually doing in the background. And so I learn more about how it's working and, you can modify things easier in that way. So it sounds like you kind of did a similar approach with the LLMs by just like getting it to a point where it breaks to understand like its limitations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we talk about coding, right? Because there are certain things like understanding how to get your ports to work or other things like that. Like LLMs are like really good at some of that networking stuff, and you just got to think, oh, it's probably because there's so many forums out there where different people have asked pretty much the same question, like how do I get and so like LLMs are trained on all that data, and so they're pretty good at answering them. But then you got other aspects, right? So like one thing I found LLMs are really bad at is writing mocking tests. And it's just because mocking in general is really difficult. And so most people who do it wrong or, they get it to work just enough. And a lot of people just aren't necessarily good at this thing. And so a lot of the examples and code bases or, and when people are talking about it in forums and things like they might work, but they're not very good. And so when you start asking a model to help you, help you mock your test, like it's not going to give you very good answers, and it's probably going to set you up over here when like it could have been really easy if you kind of knew what you were doing. And so there's definitely so you just kind of like it like an LLM is often an average towards the mean, right, based off of all the information it is trained on. And so yeah, so like if the average person isn't good at it, and we have lots of like texts and examples of people talking about it and communicating, like the LLM isn't going to be very good at it either, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so that's not something difficult. Like we can overcome that, right? Like you can just fine tune the model and give it like good examples of mocking tests. But it is something you kind of have to know. Okay, this is an edge case, and like this is how I can improve it, and things like that.
Yeah. And that just loops back around to you having to know some bit of knowledge to be able to then transfer that and get what you want out of it.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good way to tie that back in. That was
All interesting. So, for folks that are listening that may want to learn more about LLMs and how they work, what would you recommend that they do in their quest?
I mean, there's the case of just sitting down and playing with an LLM. I would say, like, it's still surprising to me how many people don't do this more often. And just like, hey, if you have like, it's amazing how much it can help you in your career doing just random things. How it can help you overcome or understand things. So just find ways to like use it throughout your day and be thinking about how like what are these different tools and how might I use them to improve. And so um, like e- e- even 2 years, like there's still lots of people who only use it occasionally. And so that's one thing. The other is so there are several good books that are, finally getting out. Writing a book takes a really long time, so I wish they were out a little bit sooner. But I was one of these people trying to write these books as quickly as possible, and like it still just took so much time. And so yeah, and you don't even necessarily have to get my book. I know there's several out there that are really good. Like building an LLMs from scratch is one I've read, and it was very very good. Definitely geared towards more beginners. My book, LLMs in Production, it's definitely geared more towards practitioners, but I think I've gotten lots of good reviews from beginners who said that they learned a ton from it. And then uh, yeah, there's other ways to learn, but nothing beats getting your hands dirty and just start playing with them. Not just like going to ChatGPT and talking about it, but like actually hitting the API and trying to like prompt engineer and build something with it. I think that's where a lot of people get a lot of value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any final recommendations or words of encouragement for the listeners out there?
Oh, you're kind of putting me on the spot here. I would say, um, kind of follow your passions and just, don't be afraid to try new things. Most of my career has been doing things that no one else has ever done before, and I'm I didn't ever feel like I was alone in this journey. Like there's lots of other people doing MLOps, but oftentimes there was no one around me doing it, and so um, but it's really kind of put me in a good spot in my career, and I think it'll help a lot of other people. Uh, the same, like just follow your passions. It doesn't matter, MLOps wasn't, and maybe even with LLMs, like it's not necessarily super popular, but um, it grows in popularity, and so yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much, Matt, for coming on the show. If any of the listeners have any questions for you, where can they find and or follow you?
So the best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. Matt Sharp. Just you can find me there. So
Awesome. And we'll provide a link in the description to get Matt's book. Yep. And thank you again for coming on the show. And as always, folks, happy learning.